Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here and welcome to my guide to Castrum Marinum on the extreme difficulty. This encounter is broken up into two separate fights with a checkpoint in the middle in case you wipe on the latter half. To skip to a specific phase or mechanic, please use the timestamps in the description of the video. For phase 1, before pulling the boss, you're going to want to set up pairs of players for the very first mechanic. Ideally, you have a healer east and west, a tank north and south, and a DPS to pair with each of them. While this is only for a single mechanic, it's one of the most important ones, so make sure to do this. The DPS can also pick an adjacent intercardinal direction for other mechanics that require spreading out, though often I see people just wing the spread out mechanics in the Party Finder. The first two attacks are just Emerald Weapon's basic Tank Buster and Room-wide AoEs. Emerald Shot actually hits the current tank pretty hard, but it only happens once this entire phase. I'd recommend stacking every possible tank cooldown you can manage, as long as it doesn't ruin your opener. Optimized Ultima, on the other hand, is just damage on the party, so handle that as usual. I'd also say to pop 6-second tank cooldowns pretty much any time you're taking auto attacks between mechanics. The auto attacks in both of the phases of this fight hit pretty hard and are in some ways more threatening than most of the mechanics. The first real mechanic is Aetheroplasm Production. This summons 8 orbs along the outer ring of the arena, with orbs opposite of each other tethered together. If the orbs reach the center of the room and merge, it's game over. This can be prevented by manually detonating them with your face before they reach the center. Now there's a few caveats to this. One, the damage each orb deals is split between the number of targets hit by the explosion. This is why we set up pairs before and made sure that they were opposite of each other, so each pair of players can detonate 2 orbs each while also covering 2 that are tethered together simultaneously. I'd highly advise burning all defensive abilities here that non-tanks have, and any personal healing, second wind, ranged physical damage reductions, and most importantly, big shields from Scholar, Asher, Paladins, Warriors, whatever you possibly have. There's almost no lethal damage throughout the rest of the fight, and if you get through this, most Party Finders will actually be able to clear the whole thing. The second caveat, there's actually 2 different color orbs here. You can only be hit by each color orb a single time, or the second explosion is going to kill you. This means each pair of players will have to rotate either clockwise or counterclockwise to the nearest opposite color orb, which will just be right next to you. A quick tip to determine which way to rotate: if you look left and right and you only have one option to safely rotate into a different color orb, rotate that way and everyone else should be able to follow suit. Now if you notice you have 2 options, wait to see the sides perpendicular to you, rotate, and then follow suit for them. There's actually only 2 total orb patterns here, so after a few times you'll just be able to take a glance and know exactly where you're going. Finally, if one orb in a tethered pair is blown up, the other must be detonated within a second or 2 or it'll actually explode and wipe the party. If you see the orb you're waiting for stop moving, like a step away from you, please manually step into it. Now with that information, it's a really quick execution on this mechanic. Move towards the first orbs on the cardinals and intercept them immediately in your pairs. You want to immediately run back towards the boss and not instantly blow up the second orb. You want to take this opportunity to maybe refresh shields or let the healers heal everyone before you take the second hit. You can really just stand in melee range, stand in front of your orb, and let it just float into you, only actually moving to pop it if the opposite side's pops before yours does. Honestly, even if you screw this up and a few people die, the DPS check is so lenient in this first phase, and as long as the orbs don't explode, a few deaths will not set you back. You can just resurrect and move on. Oh, and in case you're wondering, tank invulns do not work on the orbs. They will go through and they will kill you. From this point on, phase 1 is pretty straightforward. Emerald Beam is a rotating beam that also pulses several AoEs outward. You just have to rotate and dodge all the AoEs that you see on the screen. This one does also open up the edge of the arena though, making it now possible to fall off, so be careful. Next is Magitek Magnetism, the other big mechanic of phase 1 here. This summons several Magitek bombs with magnetic charges. If 2 bombs are tethered with the same charge, they are separated at the end of the countdown. Opposite charges will pull towards each other, magnets. The first pattern is really simple. 3 bombs will appear with 2 tethered together with the same charge really close together. The party should find those 2 tethered bombs and run to the wall nearest them in order to get clear of all the possible explosions. Now the 2 tanks will actually both get proximity tank busters on them and should spread them on the side of the room that only has 1 remaining bomb, making sure to stay away from each other as well. These proximity AoEs hit the tanks pretty hard, so any cooldowns you have should be used here, ideally with the main tank using their tank invulnerability. Your healers are usually completely out of range of the tanks during this, and the auto attacks on the main tank, in addition to the damage, it's just a lot. So you don't really need that many cooldowns across the entire fight. You popped a bunch on Emerald Shot, pop your invuln here as the main tank at the very least, and you'll be A-okay. The second Magitek Magnetism happens right after, and it just has a ton of bombs everywhere. It's kind of chaos. While there are quite a few safe spots in this pattern, the easiest safe spot is actually right between two bombs with the same charge and a short-ish tether. These will separate and open up a nice safe location for the whole party, even allowing you to get full uptime on the boss. Another Emerald Beam will occur and shrink the arena again, after which the final few mechanics of this phase occur. After another optimized Ultima, Emerald will summon his hands along his side. When this happens, it will actually also do a donut AoE a few seconds later, so everyone should get in the boss's hitbox when they see those hands come out. This is immediately followed by Divide Et Impera. This will have the two tanks hit by a shared tank buster, and the rest of the party each hit by their own AoE. The party should just spread out while the tanks stack and pop any available cooldowns. Your cooldowns from that first Emerald Shot should be back by now, so this is pretty much nothing else to use them on again. I keep saying that and I keep naming more things, but it's just the timing of them. You should have plenty of cooldowns for this. After Emerald puts his hands away, he will actually split in half and the bottom half will remain and use Expire. This is a point blank AoE, so just get away from Emerald Weapon when you see Expire casting. This is then followed by a red AoE marker that, after a short delay, actually expands before it deals its damage. It covers just over half of the arena, so as long as you're on the opposite side of the room from it, you should be okay. If you're exactly perpendicular along the edge as well, like you see me doing here, that also works fine. This is followed by Emerald coming back and putting his hands away again. Now this does an instant Expire AoE, so as soon as you see the hands retract into the body after split, get away from Emerald Weapon. After that is the final Magitek Magnetism. Similar to the second pattern, there's a spot between two same charge bombs with a short tether. The only difference is that two players will be given a marker over their head that eventually baits a line AoE in their direction. You just want to aim this away from the safe spot, then move between the two same charge bombs like you did in pattern number 2. That's pretty much the end of phase 1. There is another optimized Ultima, another donut AoE where he takes his hands out, and another Divide Et Impera before the boss starts charging their enrage. It's just about like 5.5–6 minutes or so. After bringing the boss's health to 0.1%, a cutscene will play, give you a checkpoint, and start phase 2. A lot of Party Finder groups deliberately wipe after the transition and redo markers and cooldowns as well. Phase 2 doesn't have much setup, thankfully. The markers you see here place 2 markers slightly offset in each corner of the arena. This is for a mechanic later, but these markers aren't even necessary for it and are quite flexible with their positioning. It'll make more sense when you see them used a little bit later. Other than that, the cardinal/intercardinal directions from phase 1 that you may have assigned for spreading out do come in handy here. Now upon pulling, the very first mechanic is Divide Et Impera again, though now it's a shared tank buster and conal AoEs aimed at each player from the boss itself. Just ensure no 2 players are too close or in a line with one another and it'll be fine. Tanks mitigate that hit as well. I'd again recommend popping those 6-second tank cooldowns whenever there are heavy movement sections, and for the actual few tank busters that there are, you can go pretty ham with your defensive abilities. For the second mechanic, time to use those markers. Primus Terminus Est will summon a sword on 6 players in the form of an arrow, usually every non-tank if everyone is alive when it casts. This will cause them to be hit for a high damage and knocked in the direction the arrow is facing. This AoE stretches across the entire arena, and if 2 swords hit a single player, they will die. Being flung into the death zone from the knockback will also result in a death. Just place your arrows in such a way that the back of the arrow is right up against the edge of the death zone and that no players are directly in your path. The markers we use help with this a ton, but common sense and a bit of awareness will ensure you don't KO anyone or yourself. Tanks, stay in the center here and avoid being hit at all. If one of those arrows goes wide and you get clipped, you are going into the wall for sure, especially considering knockback resistance does not work on them. Next up is Tertius Terminus Est. This drops 3 pairs of swords on the arena, one at a time. These will explode in the same order they drop down, meaning the first swords explode first and the third swords explode last. The concept is simple: stand where the third set of swords lands and move into the safe zone made after the first set explodes. I do see a lot of people struggle to keep track of the lines on the ground, which are actually telling you where the explosions are going to hit, though the explosion is a good bit larger. With enough practice, you'll be able to quickly see where to go, as there are very few patterns to these swords in actuality. Just be wary that swords that drop cross patterns instead of plus signs can land in the corners. I see people get hit by that all the time. After that is going to come an add phase. He's going to cast an ability, and this will replace Emerald Weapon with a Black Wolf's image. This also brings with it a line of Magitek Carpetbombers along the west wall. After a long delay, each of them will be numbered, and they will one by one begin to drop gradually moving AoEs. You'll need to stand on a later number, normally something between 3 and 5, and wait for the earlier numbers to pass before moving behind the traveling AoEs. Now the dash itself doesn't do anything from the Carpetbombers. You're just going to be looking at the explosions that follow the dash afterwards. Now, as the Carpet Bombs begin to wind down, a Magitek armor on the north side of the room will fire a large knockback from the center. You'll see a little X marks the spot there to let you know where the origin point is. This does high damage and knocks everyone away, so everyone should get close to the center and try to aim to be knocked towards a corner of the arena, while also healing up in case they got hit by a Carpet Bomb. You can use knockback resist here, but there is one other potential spot to use it, so do this at your own discretion. Now, as for the image itself, it's actually going to be attacking you the whole time, and you can attack it the whole time. It's mostly just going to auto-attack the tank and fire an attack at the occasional other player, but your goal is to just do as much damage as possible to the image while setting up for the Carpet Bombs. The damage you do to the image will actually transfer as damage to Emerald when it returns. Once Emerald returns, he will do an optimized ultima into another Divide Et Impera, both of which you've already dealt with. This is followed by a combo attack from Emerald. Now, he will cast Tertius again before casting Split, the same mechanic you saw from the first phase. Now, this time Split will either leave the bottom half or the top half behind. Now, if it leaves its bottom half behind, it's exactly the same as phase 1. It'll do a point-blank AoE called Expire into a big expanding red AoE. If it leaves its top half behind, however, it will do a half-room AoE in the direction its head lights up. This is followed by the red AoE doing a knockback instead of expanding. Regardless of which half stays behind, Tertius will be executed all the same, and the idea is the same. Go from the third sword zone into the first without getting hit. The expanding AoE version doesn't really change much about how you approach this. You'll just have to avoid that first AoE hit before doing the usual movement for Tertius. This movement is also always a center safe spot into a corner safe spot of the room, usually opposite of the expanding AoE, so it's very predictable. The knockback one, however, always seems to catch people off guard. One way to approach the knockback is to stand close to the origin point near the red AoE, locate the third sword pair location, and be knocked towards it. Fortunately, there will always be a far away corner during this pattern that is a viable knockback location without going into the wall. It will pretty much always be a corner into center of the room pattern for safe zones. Now, the other option is to use knockback resist and just go to either of the third sword pair locations, usually around the time the third sword pair is actually landing. There is one usually pretty close to the knockback as well, but if you screw up going for this, you're going right into the wall for certain. Expect people to die here pretty often and be quick to resurrect them in the party finder, but after a few tries, it is pretty simple. You actually will have quite a bit of time to res your dead here, while Emerald auto-attacks the tank before another Black Wolf's image is summoned. This phase is identical to the first Black Wolf's image, except now there will be 3 rows of Imperial Soldier images on the north side of the room. There will be one section in each row that is missing a soldier, making a safe spot for you to dodge. For this set, it's pretty important that you're lined up with the 4 or 5 numbered Carpet Bombers, so you have plenty of time to dodge both the soldiers and the Carpet Bombs in this phase. There are only 2 patterns for the Carpet Bombers, thankfully. One that has a 5 right up against the north wall in front of the soldiers, and one with a 4 one row back. Both of these make for excellent safe zones to do all of the dodging, so definitely consider moving to those. The 4 pattern also technically has a 5 way away from the wall that you can use, but I find it harder to identify the rows of soldiers at a glance from back there. If you can do it and you want to just keep casting as a caster, go ahead, but if you want to play it safe, get closer to the wall with the soldiers. After you've done this, you got one other mechanic and you're done with the fight. All that's left is Secondus Terminus Est, which is similar to Tertius, except the swords are actually baited directly on top of everyone but the healers, assuming everyone's alive. Simply put, people with plus sign markers should drop them near the corners of the room, and people with cross sign AoE should drop them towards the cardinals. They don't all have to be on different corners, different cardinals. You just have to make sure that they leave a nice big open space in the center of the room where everyone can safely avoid all the explosions. You'll probably figure it out pretty quick based on the patterns you're seeing on the screen here. After this, there will be another Tertius and Split combo, whichever one wasn't used the first time around. There's another Primus Terminus Est, and finally, one last Divide Et Impera before the Enrage starts to cast. All in all, the encounter clocks in at a maximum of just under 6.5 minutes. Fortunately, if you wipe, again, you did get a checkpoint, so you won't have to redo the entire first phase as well. And with that, that's going to be a wrap for my Emerald Weapon Extreme Guide. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned. We got plenty of other videos coming out for patch 5.4, so keep those inboxes checked, and be sure you're getting your notifications. On that note, I'll see you all in the next one, and until then, take care.